Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Updates on Home Visiting During COVID-19. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. When you join today's webinar, you selected to join either by phone call or computer audio. If for any reason you would like to change your selection, you can do so by accessing your audio pane in your control panel. This webinar is being recorded. All participants are placed on mute for quality assurance. You will have the opportunity to submit questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time, and we will collect these and address them during the Q&A sessions throughout and at the end of today's presentation. And with that said, I would like to now turn it over to Kathy Glazer.
Thanks, Val, and good morning, everybody. So glad y'all could join us for a conversation today about home visiting in Virginia. We are pleased to have a chance to bring some additional information and updates about home visiting, about accommodations made to make sure that home visiting services can continue through the pandemic, and to learn about ways that each of you can continue to connect to and make sure that families have access to these services now and into the future. We are grateful to Laurel Aparicio, who is the Executive Director of Early Impact Virginia, and Jackie Hale, Collective Impact Manager, for their time and expertise today. And with that, I'll turn the presentation over to them.
Great. Thanks, Kathy. It really is wonderful to be here with you all today on what has turned out to be a lovely but really quite chilly spring day. And before we get started, I did want to give a big shout out to the incredible team at VECF for the tremendous job they've done to regroup quickly and lead us through these last number of weeks. It's really been especially valuable to us to know that we can get up-to-date information on what's happening across all of the vital parts of our communities, and to know that we're all pulling together to lift up the needs of our early childhood system in really quite concrete ways. So thank you to VECF for coordinating this work, and to all of you who have been contributing to the work and ensuring that your voices and the voices of our families have been lifted up for quick and responsive action. As Kathy said, I'm Laurel Aparicio, and here with me today is my amazing colleague, Jackie Hale. We will be taking turns talking through our slides, and we'll also be taking questions along the way. And as breaks in the presentation take place and as questions come up, we will be sure to address them. We really are pleased to be here with you today and to be able to share a bit about how our local early childhood home visiting programs have been able to continue to support families throughout the pandemic. I know we have a whole lot of folks on today's webinar, and many of you may have different familiarity with who we are and what home visiting is all about. So before we launch into sharing too much about how things have changed over the last couple of months, we wanted to briefly tell you a little bit about Early Impact Virginia, what home visiting looks like in Virginia, and then spend most of our time together talking about how local programs are continuing to support families. Early Impact Virginia really represents the different models of home visiting programs that provide services to just about 10,000 families in all parts of our state. Our purpose is to bring together folks in ways that help to create a more cohesive and ultimately a more comprehensive system of support for families during pregnancy and early childhood. Can we go ahead and advance to the next slide? This slide provides a really nice overview of the different program models that are operating in Virginia and the types of services that are provided as part of our work with families. And while you may not be familiar with all of these models, chances are you're familiar with some of them and likely work together with local programs in your area already, since we are in the bulk. Services are provided in 123 communities in all parts of the state. And while we'll spend the bulk of our time today talking about how local services have changed over the last couple of months, I think the big takeaway today is to know that for the most part, all of our local programs are continuing to operate in some form or fashion. And so that means that while we've had to adapt to connecting with and supporting families in different ways, our local programs are still able to connect and support with families, and they're doing so in all parts of the state. However, that could look different based on the resources, either in the community, in the program, or the family's resources. But every single home visiting program is continuing to provide some level of support. And as a matter of fact, what we found is that by and large, families are even more engaged in visits now than ever before. So if we could advance this slide. There we go, great, thanks so much. So for those of you who may be less familiar with what home visiting does, I think this slide provides a really nice reflection of our work. Usually when we talk about home visiting, we talk a whole lot about the what home visitors do. And of course, that's really important. But what I like about this slide is that it really helps to illustrate both the what and the underlying why. Home visiting is all about supporting families to achieve the best outcomes for themselves and their young children, but connecting them by connecting them with resources, anything from helping folks to address their healthcare needs to accessing benefits or finding safe, affordable housing. Home visitors also support families to learn fun, nurturing ways to build their relationships with their children and foster healthy development. But the most important ingredient in home visiting is the relationship that home visitors build with families. Home visitors truly are caring, supportive connections for our young families. And as you can imagine, this connection and these relationships for so many of our families are now more critical than ever. And you see our slogan here, help is at the door. Obviously, home visiting generally takes place in the home. It's right there in the name. And so you may be wondering how we're able to continue providing services since our home visitors are not physically able to go into families' homes any longer. Well, thanks to technology, our local programs were able to very quickly transition to a virtual home visiting through virtual applications, much like the one we're on now, or many of you, I'm sure, are quite familiar with Zoom by now. I typically live on Zoom all day anymore, as many of you do, I'm sure. And for those families, though, who don't have access to technology or broadband internet, home visitors have also been able to connect over the phone or by dropping things off in safe ways, whether it's activities on their front porch, mailing items, waving from outside the house, but still really connecting with families. And programs and home visitors have been able to work together with families to figure out the ways that work for them to connect and support in whatever way truly is most meaningful for each individual family. And so for the time being, we're changing this slogan from help is at the door to help is at the virtual door. And while moving these forms of service delivery have been incredibly challenging, we've also been really overwhelmed by the response of families as we've seen just how vital these connections, whether in virtual form or telephonic form, or as I said, waving from outside the house, have been for families. And I can honestly say that I've been truly overwhelmed by the tremendous response of our home visitors. They've always been incredibly selfless and generous. But now more than ever, their selflessness has been so inspiring. And just like so many of the heroes that we hear about every day and that I know you're interacting with every single day, I can truly say that our home visitors have been heroic. They are providing lifelines for families whether by helping families get their basic needs met, like food, diapers, or cleaning supplies, or by supporting fun parent-child or developmental activities through a Zoom call. They've been just so creative and tenacious about continuing to be that connection and resource during this crisis. And as you can imagine, social isolation and anxiety has been particularly high among families, and it can especially be high for those families who may be expecting a child or home with a newborn or other young children. We have found this to be particularly true. But then also for those families who have an existing health or mental health need or issue, those needs have only increased and been exacerbated through this crisis. And so it really has been quite critical for our families to have that one consistent person in their corner and available to them, even if it's not physically. What we're hearing time and again is that this has really made all of the difference in the world for families, to help them be able to manage the stress and the uncertainty of this time. And so we were very fortunate to have strong leadership among our state program models to support this very rapid shift to virtual home visiting. And much like you, those first few weeks were really chaotic as local programs and local providers figured out how to manage the transition. But what we were finding is that the transition has been embraced and welcomed by families. And overall, while we've seen some impact on referrals of new families to home visiting programs, as our more traditional referral strategies have been disrupted, like so many other things in our world right now, we're also finding, though, that among those families who are enrolling or were already enrolled, engagement in home visiting has actually increased. And it's really a true blessing in an otherwise really difficult time for us all. So now what I'd like to do is we can go ahead and advance the slide, and I'm going to turn things over to Jackie so she can share a little bit more about the details of how our local programs are supporting families, how we're supporting that work, and then what we're doing to support the workforce and today and into the future.
Great, thanks, Laurel. So hi, everybody. This is Jackie Hale, Collective Impact Manager with Early Impact Virginia. And I think one of the things I'm also going to try and do today as we talk through this is provide some comparison. Having worked with Smart Beginnings Greater Richmond for several years prior to this role, I'm very happy to be here. And it's good to see some names on the attendee list that I've been working with as well in the past and continue to work with now moving forward. And I see a lot of folks on there kind of within the early care, classroom-based kind of childcare sector. And so I think as we continue to talk about the importance of partnerships in early childhood and how home visiting is being coordinated and supported right now in Virginia, to draw some parallels and comparisons between some of the early care sector, classroom-based, and as well as home visiting. So, as Laurel said earlier, home visiting really is providing support to families. The child is at the heart of the family, but a lot of the services and support really is focusing on the parents, on the moms and dads, goal setting, doing maternal depression screenings, screenings for IPV. So really working with the family and the adult to create and foster that attachment, to really help cultivate the art of play in some cases so that families can really be their child's first and most important teacher. So I think that's one kind of difference in some ways where home visitors really are working with the adults more directly a lot of times than the child, which is what we see in a lot of our center-based and home-based programs from a child care standpoint. However, knowing that early childhood component is the most important piece. One of the things that we saw that we needed to do with home visiting back in the olden days of around March the 12th was beginning to see all of the changes and guidance coming out, news about COVID-19 rapidly changing, rapidly shifting. There was guidance coming out at the national level. Our home visiting programs in Virginia, we have 8 evidence-based home visiting models And a lot of those models have national offices that release guidance and release tips, release those best practices. So it was great that all of these national models were releasing this guidance, but that still needed to be translated into what did it mean for Virginia? How could we take that guidance and then apply it to what Governor Northam's decisions were, and what our situation, what our openings and closings look like in the state. So that's the role that EIV, Early Impact Virginia, and our alliance, which is a group of representatives from those evidence-based home visiting programs and our public funders at the state level, really started to translating, pulling that together, taking what was usable, what we knew we needed was really important, and starting to compile that and get it back out to our home visiting programs at the local level. So very quickly, around March 13th, that Friday the 13th was when our alliance came together, and based on all the guidance at the national level, which was really saying, hey, home visiting programs, we realize now with social distancing being the norm, is that it's not safe for home visitors to go into the home. So all the guidance was providing information on how home visiting programs could shift into using virtual visits and telehealth, but there wasn't anybody to make that call to say, okay, this is it. We're no longer going to be going into homes. We're going to implement this, and we're going to shift to virtual visiting. And so on March 13th, that is what the Alliance did. That is, we worked with our public funders, with VDH, the Department of Health, and with the programs to make that call and then get the information out to the local program. So that Monday, our local program directors had that information in hand and had what they needed to be able to make the right decision for their programs and their staff, and ultimately for the families they served. So that was when we began working on helping support the programs to implement those virtual visit technologies. Our work quickly branched into ongoing coordination at the state level, and also really ramping up some of our workforce development at the national level, which Laurel will cover later. But Anika, if you want to go to the next slide. So from a state level standpoint, and this has really been my focus area, our coordination really started around these priorities. The first priority was to ensure that local programs could make that shift to virtual home visitings. As with any new technology, or any programmatic change, as many of you are familiar with, change is hard. And so how can we help support and facilitate that shift? So our alliance began meeting and working to gather resources. I'm sure, like many of you, our inbox overfloweth with articles, with links, with videos, with all these tips on how to start using technology and make that shift. And so the Alliance really took a lead role in prioritizing what was the best information, what was the most important information to get out, and what could be easily digestible, kind of nugget sized. How can we make sure we're getting this information out in a way that during a time of crisis, our home visiting programs would be able to get it, to internalize it, and really to make it work for them. So very quickly, our focus was that getting shift to virtual home visiting. And for us, what that looked like was addressing HIPAA concerns. So again, home visiting, a lot of it lives in kind of that health-related world with client information. I know sometimes in early childhood, we're dealing with FERPA and other issues. Again, privacy for our families is very important. And so our concerns for our programs was around HIPAA. We've got patient information, we've got moms that are pregnant. So how are we making sure that that information is protected? So we were able to gather and galvanize and really, because the group was working together, capitalize on some of the relaxed HIPAA guidance that was being put out at the federal level. So we took that and put it into a very easy to understand format. In addition, we started capturing information on virtual platforms. What is usable? What is HIPAA compliant? Again, that relaxed guidance really made it easier for home visiting programs to use technology that was already at hand. And we'll see this a little bit later on, but really just helping to address some of those concerns early on, that FaceTime, that is okay. That there were certain very accessible, usable ways and usable tools that, that home visitors can use. In addition, what we found, and this was for our families, was especially our families with the Medicaid Lifeline phones, that had very limited data and cell service. This was a very important priority population for us because the limits for data and minutes were already limited on those phones. Knowing that some of our families were going to be receiving services only via those phones, it was really important for us to understand and to get the managed care organizations in Virginia on board, or understanding the importance of increasing or making note of what those data and minutes were. So in addition to pulling together information on just how we share and protect our HIPAA-related information about those virtual platforms, what tools are okay to use, what do we not want to use. We also were able to capture information on how those minutes and those data limits were increased, particularly for families with Medicaid Lifeline phones. And that was very important, especially for a lot of our pregnant moms at that point in time. Again, you know, it's already a stressful situation, and then having to consider going into the hospital and not having possibly not having family with you, not having them be present at the birth. It was really important for our home visiting programs to be able to stay in touch with those moms as best as possible and help them through that time. So we also created a document. It's not included today in your attachments, but it's available if you're interested. That includes what those those minutes are and how that data was increased. And also captures, again, some of the necessary stuff for some of our rural programs. Where could they get access to Wi-Fi? What private cell phone companies started increasing data limits or making that more accessible? So again, I think one thing that has been a silver lining is that as a nation, we've seen a lot of support shift to really be one and to be united in our approach and response to this. And so just capturing that information to get it out to our home visiting program so they could tell their families, we've definitely got the minutes because your cell service has increased, or this is where we can get access to free Wi-Fi via this hotspot. So that was a critical first priority. Priority number two, let's understand those funding and contractual implications, kind of where the rubber meets the roads a lot of time. Our alliance, which has been meeting sometimes twice a week since March the 12th, includes our primary funders at the state level, which is Virginia Department of Health and Virginia Department of Social Services. So the great thing is that they've been members of our alliance for years, and that they have developed really strong relationships with home visiting leads at that alliance level, and we're able to listen and to hear some of the concerns and some of the questions that programs were having. Could they use funding for PPE? Could they use funding to buy tablets for families to make sure they had them in hand so their home visitors could connect? So to the extent possible, those funders were able to hear and take those considerations into as a part of the decision-making process. And so while we're not always able to do everything we want, I think with any funding, that's always the case. It was a very two-way street, and they're very flexible in understanding and listening to the concerns from the field. One of the other pieces of this is, again, really making sure that home visitors and programs continue to make sure they're operational, to make sure they stay open. So that was one of the things that was really important for us, and kind of segues into priority number three, taking stock. So we knew that the decision had been made to shift to virtual visits, but our home visiting programs live in different agencies across the state. Some live in health departments, some live in departments of social services, some are nonprofits, some are in hospitals. So it's a varied mix as to where these home visiting programs are hosted. And so we needed to take stock. And our priority number three was getting out and understanding with how many programs were open, if they were physically open or if they were teleworking, and also how many had made that shift to virtual visits. And we'll go into a little more detail to that on the next slide as well. But so we asked them, not only are they open or closed, are they teleworking or no, but are they providing home visits how? Via phone, via video? Are they doing it via both? And also asking them what platforms were they using. So we will be sure to hit that on our next slide as well, and get really specific as to how many programs are able to provide and make that shift. Priority number four then too, one last time, sorry Nika, is to make sure that once we knew programs were open and had made that shift, how can we now implement support? What does that look like? Is it from a professional development standpoint? Is it making sure they have additional training? I think, as Laurel said too, we are a lot of us zoomed out, but how can we make sure there's opportunities for reflection, for that reflective supervision, for ensuring that the home visiting program supervisors and their home visitors feel supported. And also many of them are, like all of us, dealing with the pandemic in our own ways as well. So making sure that there's a time to implement support at all levels, from a programmatic standpoint, nuts and bolts operational, but also person to person. What sort of compassion and caring support are we putting in place to ensure that this workforce feels supported? So next slide. Now here's the shift to virtual home visiting. And this is one of the questions I see here. Are virtual visits taking place by phone and via computer? Any types that have worked best? So yeah, almost all programs in the state are conducting virtual visits. Most are using both video and phone. And if you check out in your handouts box, there is an updated list of home visiting program closures and service adjustments. And that actually has a detailed list by home visiting model as to how many are using the video platforms, if they're using both or the other. So you can take a look at that as well. This is the high level summary. So again, almost all programs, one or two are still doing phone only, but most are doing both video and phone. The most common platforms are Zoom, Facebook, so Facebook video chat, Google Duo or Google Hangouts, FaceTime. A few are using more medical kind of EMR tools like DoxyMe or ClockTree. But again, I think one of the big reasons this has been successful is when that HIPAA guidance came out and said, hey, some of these tools are okay to use right now. They were tools that home visitors were already familiar with, like FaceTime, like Facebook video messaging. And they were also tools that our families were familiar with. So that has been, I think, one of the other reasons why we've seen some strong engagement now. In addition to shifting to virtual home visiting, almost all programs in the state are providing additional supports to families. The most common additional supports, of course, number one, diapers and wipes, formula, food or meals, and then also books or learning activities, like Laurel said. And if you guys have a chance to check out that document, the updated list of home visiting program closures and service adjustments, you'll see more specifically some of those additional supports. And just to recap as well, the home visiting program models that we have this information on include Healthy Families, CHIP, Resource Mothers, so some of our programs have two models in place, so Healthy Families and Parents as Teachers, Nurse Family Partnership, Loving Steps or Healthy Start, as well as Early Head Start and Head Start home-based. So again, acknowledging that our Head Start programs provide both center-based and home-based services, particularly in some of the western and southwest areas of the state. They have a pretty strong market share of working with families in that area. Okay, next slide, great. So how has it gone, right? So I think one of the things that we've seen is that some of the early responses have been great. Some of the initial data has been very positive. So here's just a snapshot of some of the feedback and comments that we've gotten. Approximately 85% of scheduled visits are being completed, which is comparable to pre-pandemic levels of approximately 80%. Some programs have enrolled 498 new clients in March, which was comparable to March in previous years. 98% of families enrolled prior to quarantine are still active. They've only lost 2 since transitioning to virtual visits. And just our rates are way up. Many home visitors who were reluctant to use telehealth before get it now. And I think that's really where we want to be as an alliance and as a state, is capturing the silver lining. So really making the best out of the situation that nobody expected, that none of us were really prepared for, and that is truly taking a toll on every facet of society. But in this lesson, how can we take what is working and apply it so that we don't lose those gains? And also, again, really continue to meet the needs of families. I think from a generational standpoint, we're seeing some really high engagement rates with young families doing the virtual visits. It's working for them. I think home visitors are also seeing that they're still able to provide the quality of programmatic services that they were providing in person as well, and supporting them to continue to do that. So that has been a big gain. There's also been some interesting, we just had a connection session yesterday with a couple of programs in the Fredericksburg area. And one of the things that was not anticipated, but it's really kind of addressing equity and power imbalance in the relationship with the families using video chat with the home visitors. the families can see a little bit of a window into the home visitor's home. So much like families who open up their homes for the home visitors to come in and visit them, they're inviting them into their space. These virtual visits allow the families to see a glimpse into the home visitor's home as well. So it's really doing a lot to kind of address and engage and even deepen some of the trust. So that has been some just real positive, just some anecdotal information to share with you guys on how it's gone. And true, to be completely frank, it's not all rainbows and puppies. There's definitely been some challenges. There are some staff that really miss, that this being physically connected and getting a chance to be out and about. So our home visiting supervisors are working hard to make sure they are continuing to meet and reflect and coach those staff through the changes and make sure they feel supported as well. Next slide, thank you. So that's kind of where we landed for our state level response. And I think now, I know I see a couple questions. So just before we kick into national level, where Laurel's gonna pick up some more there, are there any questions that we've missed in the chat, Kathy and Val?
Thanks, Jackie. I'm taking a look to see. I think you've addressed some of this, but I do think that we had a comment just on your last slide about just that it's interesting to note the the participation in the virtual visits. And I think this attendee is just wondering if this is information that we can use in the future about, are there benefits to virtual visits for some parents, and how do we really think about and weigh the balance of the assets with the virtual versus the the more in-person physical presence?
Absolutely. Yes, if you could see me nodding. I know our camera's not on, but absolutely, we want to, I think there are going to be some pieces of this that we want to make sure we carry forward, because really this helps meet the needs of families more precisely. Right, so some families are more comfortable with the virtual visits. Some might like it, regular face-to-face. I think there'll still be a mix of that as well. One thing that we were discussing just this past week at an Alliance meeting too, I think engagement rates are really high because everybody's stationary, right? Nobody's going anywhere. We're not missing appointments because we don't have anywhere else to be. So I think that is another factor to consider. That will change once things reopen and the stay at home is lessened. So I think that, again, these rates are great, and they've been really helpful in moving the workforce and moving the field forward for right now. But that when things start to change, we're going to have to continuously look at that and recognize that as families move out and about, that there will be some changes there as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. It's just a really interesting aspect to think about, what may change that is more of a permanent change than a temporary change. So
absolutely,
glad that we're learning along the way. Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you for that. All right, Laurel.
Yep, I am here. And that's actually a great segue into this next topic that we wanted to share with you. And it's about how we have also been contributing and thinking about this, not just in our state, but as a field as a whole. What does it look like as we transition into this new type of work and support for families? Who does it work well for? Who might prefer, and where might it work better for some families to continue in our traditional approaches? And how will we move in a direction of capturing the data and the evidence to really help determine and make some of those decisions for the future? Because I think we all recognize that while this has been incredibly challenging, it's also opened up a lot of those opportunities, as Kathy and Jackie said, to better understand how our system of support and our different models are able to transition to incorporate virtual home visiting and telehealth or telephonic connection with families much more intentionally into the future and into our models of service delivery. And to get that started, we were fortunate to have been asked to participate in the development of the Rapid Response Virtual Home Visiting Project. And the reason we were asked to do this, many of you may be familiar with the National Institute for Family Support Professionals. Virginia was a partner in developing that with the state of Iowa. It's an online professional development system that we have led that work here in Virginia through Early Impact Virginia, along with our professional development partner, James Madison, or JMU. And so as initial conversations got underway in March about home visiting across the nation was adapting and moving to these digital or virtual platforms and telehealth platforms, we recognized and began planning to support the needs of providers across the field. Regardless, as you saw, we have multiple program models in Virginia. The ones that I shared with you, the data on the slides, earlier are those models that have national affiliations or are state administered, but we even have many more services that are provided in the home. And so there's a whole lot we can learn, and there's a whole lot of support that could be provided to support folks who are having to transition so rapidly so that they have the confidence, the skills, and the resources that they need to be able to do this work. And so we began these conversations and were asked to join several other partners to lead this national rapid response work. So in addition to our work through the Institute, we have been joined by the National Alliance of Home Visiting Models and the National Parents as Teachers Organization. Again, we're fortunate that we've already had a couple of our national models who have been piloting or using virtual home visiting as a strategy over the last several years. And in these circumstances, traditionally, these virtual approaches were really seen as an alternative to traditional home visiting for those families or circumstances in which going into the home was simply not feasible or advisable. And in particular in Virginia, where we've piloted this, is down in the Norfolk area, where the Up Center has been piloting this with military families. And so together, we were able to very quickly form a national collaborative structure to not only support the development and dissemination of relevant content through weekly webinars, much like what DECF has been doing, and developing resources to support this transition, but we've also done so in a way that is wholly inclusive of home visiting programs, providers, as well as early childhood partners from all over the country. And what you will see as we share some of our resources later is that you can link in and have access to all of the materials that have been developed, the webinars, and additionally to all of the professional development and e-learning opportunities that are available through our institute. Primarily been designed for our home visitors, but as you know, when you work in early childhood, there's a whole lot of overlap in the work that we do. So I think you will find that there's a whole lot of relevant materials and resources for you there as well. So the first thing we were able to do was to create content to specifically address the needs of home visitors. If you will advance this slide, please, Anika. There we go. Perfect. The how-to of using technology for virtual home visits, strategies for enrolling new families virtually and gaining consent. And of course, understanding how to also continue to do all of the other activities that home visiting traditionally does, like screening or support, that make up the more traditional types of support that home visitors are providing. And so while the webinars are specifically focused on home visitors, there are also really topics, again, that I wanted to highlight that may be of interest to you as well. In particular, if we will advance the slide, please. Thank you. I wanted to highlight the two-part Ages and Stages webinar series that we did just a couple weeks ago, where folks were able to watch a webinar that provided guidance from Brooks Publishing, which owns the ASQ, or Ages and Stages screening tool. And they provided guidance on how to use that tool virtually. And then folks were, after they were able to watch that webinar, they were able to submit questions for a live Q&A session with those ASQ Brooks experts and other experts in the early childhood field. And then we had that live Q&A session where folks got their questions answered, and we were able to then develop very specific guidelines and guidance for the field for not only doing developmental screening in a virtual setting, but also for using a virtual ASQ approach that had been approved and developed by Brooks Publishing specifically for use in the home. So we were able to roll that out just over a week ago to the entire network. Again, that is available to you through our website, along with all of the materials. And with all of our weekly webinars, what we're doing is not only providing these very content-rich webinars that are developed by experts from all over the country, but we're also putting together those supplemental resources that folks can take and use immediately in their work. So that has been highly beneficial, and we've been only able to do this by bringing together a really extensive array of folks who have just stepped up so quickly and so willingly to do this. Today, we will have a webinar that addresses reflective supervision. Jackie actually just mentioned reflective supervision, but how do we support staff, and particularly support staff in a reflective capacity virtually when we're not together in the same place? How can we do that in ways that are meaningful for home visitors and for their supervisors?
And Laurel,
next week, yeah.
Oh, Laurel, I was going to say, we do have a kind of a question that probably wasn't quite related, but I think is a good example of how there's some overlap and some differences. So these rapid response webinars, the recordings that are available and the weekly webinars that take place at Eastern Time, 3 p.m. on Wednesdays, are certificates available for when people complete these webinars?
Yeah, so actually that's something we were just talking about today. We are making certificates available, and they will be posted along with each of the webinars once those webinars have been completed.
Great. There was a question about today's webinar for right now, which is more informational, but I think that's a good example of where home visiting professional development and early childhood professional development do clearly overlap, is that need for that consistent framework for professional development and that documentation. So accessing the resources on the rapid response website, which will have that link in the next page. And then there's also the one-page overview is also in the files, the document section for today's webinar. And I thought too, Laurel, the enrollment and consent, the resource guide for that webinar was really great and also pertinent for some of our early childhood programs, particularly those that are going to be doing some enrollment for pre-K. How are you capturing documentation? How are you getting people to sign off and consent? Is it a text? Is it a picture? What does that look like? So I thought that the checklists and resource guides are just very well done that are available on the Rapid Response website and very pertinent, I think, to the early care world.
Absolutely. And, you know, next week we're actually doing a webinar that, again, I think really crosses this. It is obviously not home visiting specific. It's going to be all about addressing self-care. And we are partnering up with Brazelton Touchpoints, who also many of you who may work with Head Start or Early Head Start are very familiar with Brazelton Touchpoint Center. And we're partnering up with them to provide this particular webinar and the follow-up activities and resources related to that. So you will be able to find all of the information about our rapid response activities and resources on our Institute website. If you can advance this slide, please. We'll talk very briefly about that, where we already have more than 60 e-learning trainings that are available free of charge to anyone. And we know that there are a lot of folks right now who may have time to do professional development, online activities, and this is a great resource because they are free of charge and can be done anytime, anywhere, as long as you have access to a computer. And all of our professional development trainings do have a certificate that comes along with it, and we have many opportunities and cross sharing opportunities across many of our early childhood training systems, like the CDA and things of that nature. So if you ever have questions or need information about how any of the trainings that we offer can be translated or counted as credit for other training requirements, you can reach right out to us about that, and we can answer that for you as well. And if you have any questions or would like to participate in any of our rapid response work, don't hesitate to contact us. This is truly a labor of love, and we welcome your involvement and your input. What I'd like to do now is turn things back over to Jackie so that she can talk about other ways that you can support our work moving forward.
Thanks, Laurel. So next slide, please, Anika. Thank you. What you can do. I think there's good questions here too coming in about the professional development, and yes, we're happy to share the information. So I guess first off, if you do want to stay in touch and want to learn more about the webinars, the easiest thing for you guys to do is to visit our website, earlyimpactva.org. And at the bottom, there's a little sign up to sign up for our newsletter, and we do include reminders about those webinars as well as other trainings that we make available on the Institute, which is the online learning platform that's available all the time. That is, and a lot of those have early childhood content that's relative to both home visitors and early care educators. So go to our website, earlyimpactva.org, and you can sign up for our newsletter, and you will get information on trainings and professional development that are available definitely online, and perhaps one day even again in person again when that time comes. So what can you do right now specifically to support your local home visiting programs? Number one, they are open. Please keep referring families. We've heard this time and again. A lot of our home visiting programs had strong referral relationships with local providers, with healthcare providers, with hospitals, with human service nonprofit agencies. So please, if you've used and referred families to home visiting in the past, keep doing it now. They are open. Reach out. Also, another thing is actively promote home visiting within your program. Sometimes, there are, in addition to families being served there in a child care center, if there's a family that you feel just has needs that your teachers aren't able to meet, or you can tell that they're struggling, or they might not have the support or have access to some of the food or diapers, and your team has really worked hard to do the best they can from an early care standpoint, but you just feel you feel that it's more than you're able to provide. Those families could be interested, they could be supported by home visiting. So just to actively promote it within your organization, to know where those programs are, and to be able to connect families there. In addition to some of our workforce, similar to the early care sector, sometimes in home visiting, some of our workforce qualify oftentimes or could also need support. So just being mindful of your staff and your teams that could also benefit from home visiting. If they just don't have a support system, if they don't have family nearby, but have young children or are pregnant, that's always something to consider. So just to be that active voice and champion for home visiting within your organization as well. Are you looking for 3 or 4-year-olds to enroll in pre-K? Call us, not Jackie, but your home visiting program. They have families with 3 and 4-year-olds. So they are a captive audience. And I know actually there's some good examples of this in Chesterfield County. I would say their Healthy Families program used to work directly with Chesterfield County schools to enroll children in their BPI and Head Start programs as well. So reach out if you, again, are trying to enroll families, or if you're looking for 3 and 4-year-olds, contact your home visiting programs and have that conversation. Possibly set up a special event. Home visitors are great at helping support and provide the documentation needed because they've been working with these families. They know that they could have helped them apply for Medicaid or other benefits. So they're used to pulling together financial screening documentation and other eligibility information. So if you are trying to find 3 and 4-year-olds to enroll, contact your local home visiting program. What else can you do? So we at Early Impact are actually getting ready to tie up a Virginia home visiting needs assessment. We're going to be tying that up this summer, and one of the last things that we're working on is a stakeholder survey. So kind of looking for that input from you as early childhood partners and stakeholders. How do you connect with home visiting? Do you have enough home visiting in your area? So we are going to be launching that survey within the next couple of weeks and would love to be able to get your input on that. So again, if you are interested in participating in that needs assessment, that is one way you can help us, because we are using this information to help drive strategy and planning moving forward. Much like VECF helped to do with the preschool development grant and other needs assessments over the past couple of years, we are doing something very similar, and we really would appreciate your voice at the table as well. So how do I find a home visiting program? So one of the things that you can do is check out our website, earlyimpactva.org. And on that website, we have a directory. So there, if you get to our front page, you can actually click on Find a Local Program. In addition, the link is here, earlyimpactva.org/directory. So you can definitely look up on our website local programs in your area. There is a drop down to pick which locality you live in that will also show you which programs are in your area. There are also PDFs that show kind of by region where the programs are. So that is where you can find information on how to contact your local home visiting program. And here's a caveat, online directories are always fun to keep up. So if you happen to find information that needs to be updated, please let me know so I can make that change. We do usually clean this up on a annual basis. So it's that time of year, we can do some spring cleaning. So please check out our directory to find those local home visiting programs in your area. Oh, and I see a note from Kimberly Poole down at Western Tidewater. Their early Head Start program is currently enrolling home-based families. And that's so great. I've been hearing good things from your program as well. And so we want to make sure that you guys feel supported and engaged. And so it's so good to see that, again, we're open, enrolling families for the support that they need right now. I think that many of us need, and just knowing that the programs are doing a great job being really nimble and responsive. So again, this is what you can do to help. Again, everybody is really amping up their social media presence. So in addition to finding them on our website, you will find program contacts and who to call, phone numbers to make sure you're getting referral information or how to send families. You can also check out your favorite social media, if it's Facebook or Twitter. I think most of our programs have pretty solid Facebook presences. Hampton Healthy Families is one, CHIP in Roanoke, CHIP Southampton Roads. Some of our programs in Northern Virginia Family Services all have very active Facebook pages that are promoting the great work that they're doing, and also give you a way to kind of see and connect and to learn more about their services. So if you're new to home visiting and just trying to learn more, please check out our website and our directory to find their names and contact information, and then also check them out on Facebook as well. So Laurel, I think that's kind of everything.
I think so, and I've been watching the chat box and the question box, and so have you, obviously. You did a great job picking up on Kimberly's comment with their early Head Start program in Western Tidewater. Are there other questions that we can answer at this point? We do have a few minutes left.
Thank you, Laurel and Jackie. We'll see if others have questions that they want to enter in the question box. You two have provided so much great information, and it's been amazing to see how you also have been staying in touch with and answering the questions along the way. We're going to give folks just a couple more minutes to enter any last questions. And as we do that, I just was noticing as you all were talking and answering the questions that it's really interesting how even in the midst of this crisis, these opportunities have come forward. And again, not to make light of the challenge that the pandemic has provided for folks, but there are a number of things, sort of silver lining things that are coming forward that sound consistent across not only the child care provider services, but also home visiting. And that's just this opportunity to really build our expertise and use the innovations through virtual strategies. It really has turned out to be a terrific time for many providers of different types of early childhood services to access professional development, training, and TA. It's given us amazing opportunities to engage differently with families and learn a great deal more about their needs and their strengths. It has elevated the visibility for the importance of these services and of these providers, and really helps inform the plans and actions of our state leaders to stabilize and strengthen these important systems as we recover and rebuild. I really appreciate the additional kind of punctuation marks that you've provided for those amazing learnings. Now I will ask you to turn your attention to the question box because there are some more questions for you today.
All right.
So I do see one of the questions. Do home visiting services go to families that are undocumented? Yes, indeed. Families, and now more so than ever, we are really interested in ensuring that families who are undocumented are supported and have good information, accurate information, and resources to support their needs as well.
That's a good one. There's also a question about basic qualifications, or is it service specific? So yes, so there are different home visiting programs do have some different kind of enrollment criteria. So that is something that is available on our website, but also if you contact your program, they can share more about that. So for instance, some programs like Nurse Family Partnership only enroll pregnant moms, right? So if you've got a mom with a 2-year-old, that's not going to be the best fit. So there are different criteria for when and how families can get enrolled, and that really is program specific. So there is some information on our websites, and that might be something that we can get a link back out to you guys to follow up with. Laurel, I'm thinking, would that be one way to do it, or would it be just to have them contact the program? What would be the cleanest way?
Yeah, make sure I'm off mute. Yeah, I think absolutely going on to the website will give the best information, and checking out the directory to see what's there, and just connecting with your local program. Because as things are shifting, we do know that there may be other opportunities for families. So I wouldn't hesitate to call your local program regardless of whether or not a particular family would be eligible for enrollment, because that program would absolutely know of other resources that may be available, even if they're not the right fit for that family.
Got it. So I also see something that I want to clarify, the comment about what you can do if you are looking for 3 or 4-year-olds to enroll in pre-K. So that was actually targeted towards if you are a public pre-K program, or if you are a child care or pre-K program, and you are on this call and you have enrollment and are trying to find children to enroll in your BPI Plus mixed delivery Head Start program. You could contact your local home visiting program to see if they have families with 3 and 4-year-olds that could then apply. So this is, home visiting does not provide pre-K to 3 or 4-year-olds. So just to clarify, I apologize, that wasn't more clear. But if you are a pre-K program and trying to find families to apply and enroll this spring for next year, contact local home visiting to see if they have families with children that might be eligible. So just to clarify that. I also see a question from Kim about programs conducting Zoom or Zoom type meetings for groups of home-based families. So yes, We have had some programs doing some additional services. So some of them have providing parent groups is a part of the model that they do anyway. So they have shifted those to virtual and online. And I can follow up with you, Kim, about any tips and tricks on how to do it best. I'll go back and check our notes and see who has done that and see if there's any information to share. And Laurel, I might tap your brain too to see if there's anything we know that's already out there about best practices for parenting groups using virtual technology.
Yeah, I have to say that has been another bright spot for a number of programs, both in our state and all over the country. Being able to engage families in a very different way on a virtual platform for group types of activities. And families have really, again, loved that type of engagement. Many families, of course, it's not for everyone, but being able to chat with other moms who are in the same situation as them, or dads, as the case may be, during the pandemic and what that impact has been, and connect and make those connections, not just through their home visitor, but with other families as well in their communities.
Yep. I see another question about do home visits happen during work hours, or can we choose? So yes, so you do have the ability to choose kind of the best time and day. And I would think now there's maybe some different kinds of flexibility, especially with the timing of those visits. So that's certainly something that comes with a home visiting program, is really working with that home visitor to find the best fit for you and your family. The timing of those visits, when they take place, is certainly one of the options and one of the conversations that families have when they enroll in a home visiting program.
And I have to say, again, that, you know, much like everyone, our home visitors, many of them have their own children at home or their own loved ones who they're supporting right now. And so flexibility has been the name of the game for everyone. And so that's been a big part of the opportunity right now for our home visitors and families to really rethink how and when they're getting together. And by and large, when we do home visits, they typically are an hour long in the home, an hour to an hour and a half. But the virtual visits and the telephone, the telehealth visits, don't usually last quite so long, particularly when you have young kids, and attention spans on technology can be really challenging. But folks have figured out how to make that work.
Yeah, we even have one home visitor who has a 3-year-old too, and was worried because she kept running in front of the phone when she was doing her visit. So she's actually incorporated her into the visit. So she's now demonstrating some of the fine motor skills and child development activities with her own child on the phone with the family, because hey, why not?
It's amazing. Mm-hmm. Terrific. Laurel and Jackie, I see we've hit the noon hour, and you all have made this a really power-packed, chock-full learning session. Just can't thank you enough. We also appreciate the couple hundred or so attendees who have really stuck with us through this hour and asked some great questions and learned a great deal. Any last comments, Laurel or Jackie, you want to make to this audience before we close?
The only last comment would be thank you for being here today, and thank you for all you're doing for families right now. I think we've all, as you expressed, Kathy, have found that what has been an incredibly difficult time for all of us, we've been able to find some real silver linings and carry that forward for families and for ourselves. And so I appreciate that, and I appreciate what everyone's doing, including you, all of you at VECF, to support us.
Thank you, Laurel. Well said. And you are receiving many thanks in the question box. So hope you both feel great about the time that you've given today and the information that you've shared. Just want to once again thank everybody who took the time to be with us today. Hope the rest of your day goes well. And thanks again. Take care.
Thank you.